Welcome to Basic Ball Joint Builds. I'm Butch, and I like to build ball jointed figures and their accessories. In this video, I'll show you how I made this figure, plus her mount, and all the accessories for her mount. I used Sculpey Primo and Sculpey 3 to make this 6-inch polymer clay ball jointed figure. I've come up with a method that lets me rapidly build a 6-inch BJD, and I felt like sharing it with everybody. So here's a video on how I do it. I made some molds so I could cast my beads so I didn't have to make them each time. I have a varying size and selection. Some of them are double beads for elbows and knees. I have a video in my playlist that shows how I make these beads for these figures. I use the actual joint beads to help form the socket. This will end up being the upper torso block. This waist that I formed around the beads, I'll trim right down so that it'll act as like a core for me to shape around, but giving me sockets where I want them. Here I'm going to use one of my molds to cast a skull. I just will squish the top down and I'll set it aside and let it just cool and pop it out. I don't bake them in the mold. I will make my hands while they wait for that. I just make a mitt, little thumb, because the finger part will end up cutting off later on. But I find it handy to have it there while I'm sculpting the thumb and the palm area, so that I can get a good reference of size. With the polymer clay all cooled, it'll actually pop out of the mold pretty easily, and then I can just bake it. This is a baking adhesive called Bake and Bond. I use it throughout my construction process, so when you hear me talk about it, that's what it is. These are some stainless bars. I actually wrap them to make a little cylinder like a tube. I use them for spacing between the beads when I go to make the dolls. I like to have various colors so that if there's going to be one color on the upper part of a thigh and a different color on the lower part of the thigh, I can put a core in that's different colors. Here I'm just making my feet bases at the same. I'll just give them a basic slipper shape. There's always details going on, so it's just a basic foot silhouette like it's in a sock. I find that fine. And I've made a little tinfoil jig so they can keep that arch good. Because this character's going to have one gloved hand, one non-gloved hand, this hand I'm going to make in red. But again, it's just that mitt. For this character, I'm going to have to do a couple of these tubes, a flesh color, a red, and a black. These little cylinders that I make for spacers for inside the arms and the legs. I try to make them as thin a diameter as I possibly can. Most of it gets drilled out for like arms and stuff afterwards. They're so tiny. The leg ones, I leave them a little thicker. I wrap them all with tin foil so that I can form right to the bead that I've actually already casted that's going to be used in the joint. Here I'm going to build up an inner core on the torso. I'll build up about 2 or 3 times usually. But I like to push and make sure that I keep the polymer clay warm by feeling it all the time, so that I can smush it in to around the base of the beads so that I get a really good fitted cup for them to ride in. I'll repeat this same process to the waist part too, putting a front piece on and a back piece on and then smushing them together to get a good basic shape while being tight to the beads. Same process, I'll do it with the arms and the thighs. I have a habit of squishing it on, letting it get warm, and then going back and shaping after. All these tubes that I've made already, I've slathered them up in that bake and bond. So when these parts bake, they'll be as good as one piece. Using the spacers is nice because both my arms will be the identical length. Both my legs will be the identical length. And it makes posing and symmetrical so much easier. Building my pieces on bars is great because I don't get fingerprints on things, and it lets me work on things when they're both wet. Both right now, both the polymer clays I'm playing with are soft. One's not baked or cured. So not having to hold on to unbaked clay keeps it from smushing or warming up too much. This is Primo from Sculpey, and it's not too bad, but the translucent, the flesh color, you get your hands on it too much and it'll get soft real quick. And here's the torso after I've made it look feminine. And here's all the rest of the pieces. This is a whole doll sitting right there. My favorite thing about building a doll on a bar like this is everything lines up, everything fits. When you take it all off the bar when you're done, there's no sanding. Everything moves really good. The only place I may do a little sanding is in the torso waist bead because I have to shape it afterwards. But for the most part, it's just sculpt, no sanding. My figures have opening and closing hands, so that means I have to make fingers. The easiest way is to fold a thin piece over a pin and leaving that rounded back for it to ride on. The pin will also be the pin that you use to anchor the hand into the finger into the hands. But it'll also form that hole so you don't have to try drilling one in. Now this is why I casted that skull. I cast it in the flesh color I'm going to be doing the character in, and then I can just keep adding the details. I put the eyes in, then the eyebrows, then the cheeks, the nose, and I can just slowly add and sculpt to it. This has greatly increased how my faces turn out. Putting the sole on the shoe and just leaving it there, and not trying to smush it in with just a little bacon bond under it first, really helps it stick to it. With the gauntlet on the other hand, with the bacon bond, I actually want to smooth it in as soon as possible. With it just kind of stuck on for the boot, it really gives that sole kind of look. And because one hand has a glove, that means I need to make some red fingers for the other hand. I found this method of folding the polymer clay over the pin to work really good for making my opening and closing hands. It's also the point where I affix my elastic for the arms. One of the things I do love about my figures is that they can open and close their hands and actually hold on to their accessories. Little flat piece stuck on there like we did the sole, just a little thicker. Little snip snip and some rounding over, and we'll have ourselves a heel. I like to make sure I keep all those little lines where the two pieces joined in so that it looks like how the boot heels on a real boot would be. These are just the knee pads to go in for her boots. And this character's going to have a shoulder pad on her right arm. So I want to form that up. And this is just 3 beads with some masking tape. I find it works really good for making shoulder pads and pauldrons. Shape it all up, and then I'm ready to bake it. Now the bottom of her boot has this fabricy thing going on, so this was my best attempt at kind of replicating it. But this is why it was important for me to have a bottom red tube and a top black tube. Here I'm putting in her iconic bad eyeshadow. Yes, she's from an 80s cartoon. Making and baking those little round knee pad parts were made doing this a lot easier. It gave me somewhere to push on when I was putting down these little flippy things that come from the top of a boot. Little push around, and then what I'll do is I'll just separate them, the top and the bottom, so that that knee bead is just floating between the two of them, nothing touches. I can bake it just like that. The top of her shoes have this little cover thing that flops over them, so add them at this point time too. Give them some little shaping with the ball stylus to it. And because I'm working in red at the moment, let's build something else in red. Scabbard needs to be made, so that's just some masking tape wrapped around a popsicle stick cut down. Here's the pieces after they've all been baked. Here we'll put her black almost an outfit on. It's got lots of straps and stuff. There's a little bit of bacon bond in those areas where I'm sticking them, so that once I bake this, they'll be one piece. Making sure everything sits flat against the surface. Like I said, not much of an outfit. That made me have to make a different set of accessories for her because she really didn't have any. And there, now that she's mostly clothed, I can put both pieces together, make sure everything is smoothed up. And this is when I'll go around and make sure that all the parts where things are going to rotate are smooth and there's no hooks, because I hate sanding. I really don't like sanding. Here I'm going to shape that waist torso now that everything's been baked. It's two different beads stuck together. And I trim it back till I make sure everything can rotate and move around the way I like it, and then I do a little sanding. This is about the only spot, no, this is actually the only spot where I did any sanding, and it was super light. I don't like breathing in polymer clay. Here we're going to start making the hilt for her sword. I do like making the parts individually, like the hilt and the pummels. I do have a habit of putting the swords together like you would a regular real sword. Here I'm going to finish putting the straps on for her outfit. Where it curves in, I've actually used a file and ground it down in so that some of the line will be around that curve, but it won't interfere with the ball shape and be smooth. Here I have the hilt guard all opened up so that this trimmed out popsicle stick, sword shape, can slide in and out like you would a regular sword. Instead of making it so the handle could come off and on, I just little bacon bond and form the handle around it to keep the hilt there. Then I have to add some of the little details. It's got some lines that go around it, and it's easier just to put them in while it's soft right now. A lot of the times I'll just do simple on top of simple, and you get enough simple stacked and it looks pretty good. So for me, most times that'll do. This character, unlike a whole bunch of mine, don't really have a whole lot of accessories to have. So when I have things like swords and parts that you can actually hold in your hand, I like to go a little all out on them. At least go for toy quality. Here I'm gonna start making her hair. She got some big hair. So I'll wrap the body, then the neck, then the head, and I'll make a skull cap, and I'll just start layering and layering and layering, almost like you would if you're doing a welt wig. I've tried doing it the anime style hair, and I just can't get it right. I've played with welts and wigs, so this actually just tends to be a method that's a lot easier for me at the moment. Forming the hair right to the actual head I'm going to use is great because I can actually interchange hairs. I can pull hair off and on the head so that I could actually have a character with 2 or 3 different hairstyles for the one face. Eventually I'd like to get into making some more faces so that I could switch up faces and hair. I think that would be really cool. Now, time to bake and check out the parts. Now I'll space them out a little bit more because I'm going to be going into painting. Here I've added a strap for her shoulder pad. This is a belt so that it'll be able to hold her scabbard for her sword. I'll paint everything with its natural color. If it's white, white, mauve, mauve, red, red. This way when I go to do the washes, I just find it settles in better. I find painting the hockey tape works really good. It seals it all up and it almost feels like a toy grade kind of cloth. Now one thing I do afterwards is, except for the cloth pieces, any of the polymer clay I paint with a water-based acrylic. Folk arc I think is what I use. I'll let it dry overnight and then I'll put it in the oven at the polymer cure time for about 5 to 7 minutes. And it bakes it to the polymer clay and it takes any tackiness right away. And so far it's proven to be quite durable for me. I like to use my characters for stop animation and I'm always making them do stuff on the shelves and things. So yeah, it's pretty durable. One thing I do know about painting metallics is it's better if you paint it on black. Black does something to make the color pop out. Here's my belt that I'm going to paint both inside and out, and after that this hockey tape will never come apart. Not to mention that I glued it all together with crazy glue too. After I hit everything with a dark reddy brown wash, I've only recently started painting my figures when I made them. I was just leaving them in the natural colors of the polymer clay. But I had a few friends in my Facebook groups tell me that I should give it a try, and I was so glad when I took their advice. It makes everything look just so much cooler and like a higher end toy. I'm not ever trying to get for realistic, but if I can make it look like it's a cool toy that you could have bought at a store, that's about right where I'm happy to land. I've only been playing with polymer clay going up on 2 years now, and I've enjoyed it. When I first got in, I saw those Gresham Impact figures that people were making, and I'd love to get to that level, but with a doll. Oh, and as the highlights finish up, we start getting ready to go into my least favorite part of making the dolls. Drilling out all the beads. Oh, there's a lot of drilling. At least a day's worth of drilling. But that's only because I go slow. I start with the smallest drill bit, and then I just keep working up. And it's important to go straight through. You don't want to start halfway from one side and go halfway from the other side, because it can skewer the hole so it's not straight through. I use a test elastic that I've put together almost a dozen figures with now, and I have it so it hangs, and as I build my pieces I just start sliding them onto the elastic, so that if you get the first piece so it slides on, and then you get the second piece so it slides on, and that way every piece I work on gets to that point where it fits. Here I'm making a waist bead. In my beads video, it will show this more in detail, how to put the slot in, and this is like a little tube. It's actually a stir stick that when it goes down into the thigh, helps control the legs, and keeps them from kicking out from underneath them so easily. These figures I make, I'm actually able to do stop animation with them. So their joints are actually pretty stiff and move smooth enough that I don't have to jar them around. And with their hands being able to hold things too, oh yeah, I've become a big fan of making them. As you're stringing it up though, you already get a sense of how movable it is, and there's no trimming, no sanding. Oh, no sanding. Now for those of you who are more interested in just making the doll, I will have a long form video coming out very shortly that'll just be specifically about the doll here that I've made. I do that for each of my figures that I do. But here you can see the doll really starting to take shape. The knees, they require a little bit of a slit cut in them for the elastics to ride through, only halfway down the bead. And because there's two round beads together, it's a double jointed knee, so you get a lot of movement with just a little bit of a cut. I start the cuts by drilling a hole in the center halfway down. And then I test to see how well the movement will go. With each part, the doll becomes more and more complete. And being on a test elastic like this makes it easier for you to shape the size of the elastic you'll need for the end character. There's also another video I have in my playlist that just refers to making these elastics. The foot I will drill out so that the elastic has lots of space to slip down there, because it'll be like a folded over loop. And where that loop slides down into, we're going to have to drill in an intersecting place for a pin to slide in. Just so happens I use the same pins as I do for my hands. Making sure it slips through, you can see that the needle rides in the center of the hole. That's important because you need enough room on either side for the elastic so that you slide that pin straight through the center hole with that folded loop. Now we need to make a neck bead. This will have a peg in the top and a string loop that hangs out the bottom. The reason I make it so there's a peg at the top is I like it so I can take my heads off and on. And the string loop coming down gives the upper torso as much movement as I can, because I'll make the union where those loop over each other will be down in the middle of the waist. And here's that loop I was talking about. It all goes together pretty quick. Here's that elastic. It's always a figure eight. I like having an even figure eight because then it helps ride itself center so you have equal tension on both sides. These are just a pair of folded over guitar strings. Any wire will do. I like the guitar strings because they have a lot of bending and flexing, and they have a tendency not to bend or crimp. But they work just like a needle. I slide them on down through, and it's important to keep your left and right side elastics on your right and left side. It helps center the doll itself. There's some of the parts I have to put on first before I assemble the doll because unlike some of my other dolls, a lot of this gear isn't going to come off and on. It's pretty much just there. The great thing about putting it all together while I was drilling it out is it makes this assembly job just an assembly job. It's simple, it's easy, and you fly right through it. It's almost as fast as you're watching it in the video. By far, this is my most enjoyable part about the doll build, is when I get to assemble it and it just all smoothly goes together like it's a kit or something. You're about to see why we wanted to have so much space for that looped elastic to go down into the foot, because I hate struggling with it. And if there's enough room for that loop to go in and the loop to be bigger versus small, then you'll have a much easier time sliding that pin through the foot. I've done it a couple times, and because of wanting that loop to be open, it is literally this simple if there's enough room. Now when I'm doing putting the arms on the doll, I do like to string up one arm first entirely, and then just slide the elastic through and start the other side. Again, this is a figure 8 loop, and having the figure 8 lets it sit in the center of the body, because there's an elastic or a cable that goes through the center, and it naturally puts it in a spot whereabouts both sides will be even. And when it comes to ball joint dolls, that is the secret, is equal tension for both sides. Now the arms are literally just mini legs. I do put that same post into the arm like I do into the thigh. It's just a much smaller scale. The elbow is still also the same as the knee. You have to cut a passage for the elastic to move through. And my elbows are identical to my knees. There's a bead on the top and the bottom. The forearms like the shin. And the ankle and the wrist are both just brown beads. Now when I cut the mitt off, I cut the fingers off the mitt, I used some sandpaper around one of the drill bits to make a little arc. Because when we folded the polymer clay over the finger, it left it round at the back. And that round spot lets the fingers open and close. This is my favorite way, because all I had to do was cut that little groove in it so that the elastic had a place to run. And this is like the easiest way to do a hand. And it works just as easy as putting the pin through the foot. And there we have it. A very easy to make opening and closing hand. And because the elastic pulls on that pin, pulling the fingers against something, it actually has tension. And I have no problem with her holding a sword or other characters holding guns, which makes it really nice for posing. And now, because she doesn't really have any accessories, the only thing she really does have is that featherless racing pigeon she rides. I don't know what the animal's really called, but she rides it everywhere. So I've been in the habit of making stands lately. So let's take some of this XPS foam and we'll make her racing pigeon. Now her mount literally has a saddle and a harness and saddlebags on the saddle, so maybe I'll make those as her accessories, and the bird will be her stand. Now I'm not going to go into great detail making this bird. I'm going to shape it, cut the pieces, sand them so they're smooth and roundish, glue them together, and then I'm just going to paint it with some Mod Podge. I'll make a few pieces out of polymer clay, like the legs bent on some stainless steel wire. This is strong stuff. And the eyeballs. And that way I can gloss them all out, because this thing's got some great big eyeballs on it. Now, I'm not really trying to make the bird perfect, and it's very cartoonish anyways. I just want a close representation of it. I'm not trying to get too serious about it. It is, after all, just a stand. A couple coats of Mod Podge with some acrylic paint, and then a final coat of just the acrylic paint. The glossy eyes. I've had never a problem putting clear nail polish on it, but not clear nail polish. I find the Teflon top coat nail polish actually goes on, looks very glossy, and doesn't get tacky. Now when you use 1-ply of paper towel on top of hockey tape, well, I gotta tell you, once you rub that down, you're never getting that apart. So I make my templates out of 1-ply of paper towel, then I flip it over and I rub it. Afterwards, when you paint both sides of this with just regular acrylic craft paint, you'll get a very toy fabric-y feel, and it will be durable. Now here I'm only showing quick little bits on how I made this saddle and everything. I will make a long form video of just how I made the saddle and harness and everything, and the saddlebags, because the saddlebags actually open and close. I'll use a magnet for its enclosure, and you'll actually be able to put things in and out of the saddlebags. And I've built some dolls with this method before, and some of them are going on a decade old and their equipment's still holding up as good as I made it originally. Setting up for placement makes everything easier. And here I use itty bitty magnets so I could take this off and on. I could have made it on it and tried to paint it after, but for the cost of a couple little magnets so I could take it off and on, made it so much cooler and so much easier. Plus, being able to use the magnets on the saddlebags made it nice for them to open and close. Now I got a whole bunch of these little itty bitty pieces to make that connect the collar to the saddle. And then I attached them to a thin piece that I could attach to the collar. Now each time I'm attaching these pieces, I'm not relying on the glue that's on the hockey tape. I'm actually using crazy glue, the gel, over top of that sticky part, so that when these dry up and stick up, they don't come apart. I do like the saddlebags. I do like this method of making almost soft goods for characters. It's quick, it's easy, it's durable, and it can be functional. Saddle and harness like this, it's good for birds. It'd also be good for different types of lizards and stuff. Here I'm going to make the harness for around the beak and the reins to come off of it. And again, just the hockey tape and some glue. And when I paint this, you'd be surprised how cool it'll actually look, and you wouldn't even think it was hockey tape. Where she's going to hold it, I want it doubled up so it's a little thicker, so it's easier for it to stay in her hands. But making your pieces is so easy. It's like almost cutting cardboard paper. It's not like cutting fabric and fighting with it. Making up the stirrups was cool. With the two pieces of tape, glue side to glue side, with that little run of crazy glue, oh yeah, works out well. And the stirrups are usable. I made it so that my character's feet would be able to fit in them quite easily. I took an off color of my polymer clay to make her saddle for. I planned on painting everything anyways, so I just used a weird color I had kicking around. And on her saddlebag, she's got this little baggy thing. Don't know what it is, but it was just easiest to make it out of some XPS foam and paint it afterwards. And there we go. Everything's mocked up. Now, when I go to paint it, I'll use my acrylic craft paint, and I'll put a little bit couple drops of flow improver with it, just so it doesn't dry out and it moves around better. I do make sure I try to get both sides really well, and the part that had the paper towel stuck to it, I put an extra lot amount of paint there. It'll suck it up and almost feels like plastic afterwards. As you can see, it's already starting to look more like something you'd get on a toy. The reason I painted the blanket is I didn't have any fabric that was going to match the color afterwards, and it was important for it to look the same color. I was never going to unwrap it anyway, so But painting inside the bags is just as important as painting the outside. Having paint on both sides of this really make it so that it's only on the fabric when it all dries in. First I go with a regular brown and then a darker brown that's a little runnier, so anything that didn't have it will have paint in it or color. But as you can see, everything's quite flexible and movable still. If you use fabric paint that's acrylic, it works even better. The magnets are strong enough that you don't even see them, they just stick. Well, now that's finished, let's check it out on top of the bird. Like I said, this saddle setup could work for so many other weird animals. You go to the dollar store, you buy a couple different dinosaurs, you make up some saddles. What's cooler for a diorama than some people riding dinosaurs? But this same kind of method could also be used for making harnesses and tacks for, say, something pulling a chariot. Maybe you want a bunch of rams pulling a chariot or a bunch of pigs pulling a cart. Having the sleeping roll painted was kind of nice because it let me squish down the bottom so it was a little more teardrop wedge shape, which made it sit on the saddle without me having to attach it with anything. The stirrups, I like having them so that they can actually move. It helps keep the character in it. The harness here, it just slips on, and it's got that natural arc that it already sits naturally. Oop, wrong way. But, as I always say, simple on simple on simple, you get enough simple all together, and you can have something that looks pretty cool. Now that we got a stand, here's how our character ended up turning out. We got arms that bend better than 90. You don't really get to see much of her shoulder rotation because even though that shoulder pad moves, it's very limiting. But we have the opening and closing hands, wrists that can actually hold the sword at some pretty realistic angles. But she can T-pose, her arms go back pretty decent, and they even come in forward. And because of the way the joints are, she can quite easily reach in and touch her face and mess with her hair type thing. But the hands and arms, and all the body parts have quite a bit of range of motion, and there's not a whole lot of slots visible like in a lot of other ball jointed figures. She gets a good amount of waist movement, both sideways, back, and not only does it have movement, it can hold its position. In head and neck, they have a lot of good position, and even without the hair, you get even more. Now, this is a peg-topped head, so it only has that one movement at the bottom. Sometimes when I make the figures, I don't put their head on a peg. The string actually comes from the head, and I get that extra top ball movement also, which makes the neck a 2-point. She gets a great range of motion with her legs. She's a little thicker, so she doesn't quite get the full leg back, but she gets a great 90, and it's good enough for positioning. But having my dolls so that they can stand and pose are quite important. And here's how well their hands very easily go in the hands. You can close the fingers and it grips fairly tight. Thank you for watching my video, and please feel free to leave a comment. I have no problems answering any questions, and sometimes I've even been known to make a video to answer a question. Until next time, let's see what else we can bring to life. If you found this video enjoyable, maybe think about giving it a like, and maybe even a subscribe, because I've always got something new coming up.